Hi. I started gaming on consoles on the Xbox 360 around 2012. I started off playing mostly like Lego games or just, general family games with my sister. But eventually I would get into more like gaming games with like Just Cause 2, Black Ops 2, play that a lot with my cousins, mostly zombies. The Sega Genesis Collection, Sega or Sonic Generations, games like that. All some phenomenal just titles. As consoles themselves, meaning pieces of hardware, most of the consoles in the Xbox lineup either perform really well functionally, or even change the gaming market as a whole. Most of them. Xbox and Microsoft influenced gaming massively. They changed the entire market. And honestly, they influenced how gaming is as a whole. That's undeniable. But in many ways, we can argue for better or for worse. The original Xbox was released in November 15th of 2001, though it had started development originally after the massive, and I do mean massive, success of the PlayStation 2. Xbox decided that it was important to pursue this development as Sony had decided to make the PlayStation 2 capable of playing both CDs and DVDs, which was a massive problem for the PC company Microsoft. Microsoft had some solid concerns that PlayStation would run them out of business if they didn't start to try and get innovative. I mean, why would I purchase a PC that's so much more expensive when I could just buy a console and it'd do everything for me? Obviously, it's a bit of a strange statement to, look back in hindsight that, they were so threatened by the presence of the PlayStation 2, as computers are everywhere. I mean, they're even in pocket form. But at the time, this thought made sense because you didn't really need a computer just to simply, exist. But in 2001, Xbox was released to the public consumer and to a massive, massive success. Especially, some children after, I'm trying to remember, there was like some recent events going on. Oh, the logo and branding were named after the Application Programming Interface, or API, that was used in the system, DirectX. Now, DirectX is used in pretty much all of Windows modern utility stuff, and pretty much all Microsoft programs and software nowadays, with the current version being this. I'm not saying that. You can't make me. I'm not saying that. Though the actual reason for the modeling and design of the logo is based off DirectX, being the whole X on the Xbox, there is a common misconception that it was modeled after sourdough. Now, the reasoning for this is because Seamus Blackley, one of the creators of DirectX and Xbox by, extension, loved sourdough. And I do mean loved sourdough. He made some weird, 10,000 or 1,000 or whatever. It was in the thousands of year old sourdough. And I don't know what's going on with that. I don't know what's happening there. But because that explanation and that description of the logo is far more funny to me than just it's named after a program, I would like you to do a favor. For me, simply one favor. Completely disregard everything mentioned prior about it being modeled after DirectX and blah blah blah, and instead, do me a favor. Continue the tradition of saying it was named after sourdough. The hardware on the Xbox was stronger than the PS2, certainly, but I don't think that's why it succeeded. Instead, I'd like to say that it was some of the games that gave it its identity. Because as many of us already know, Xbox had a golden child, and to those of you who don't know what that golden child was, that golden child was Halo. And this game, this game did numbers for Xbox. Seriously, I would be so bold as to argue that Halo is the lifeblood, the very core essence of Xbox. And that is just a very important point to remember, because that is going to become very relevant later, and I do mean very relevant. You can even tell the popularity of Halo because they even named their voice assistant, Cortana, after the AI that, guides Master Chief throughout the majority of the series. Now, I will be covering that in a different video because Cortana is a massive piece of work, but, you could tell this was a massive influence. And, another thing too is that a lot of the games on Xbox, they weren't even on PC yet. Now, mind you, pretty much everything would eventually get moved to PC. But if you were a PlayStation player and you wanted to play Halo, Forza, some of these kind of games, you had to have an Xbox. If you wanted to play Xbox games, you had to have an Xbox. And these games were good. Not all of them, some of them weren't certified bangers, but a lot of these games were solid, quality games, and they were fun. Keep a note of that. I really want you to keep a note of that. Do me a favor and keep a note of that. Now, I could continue with the positivity and all that, but that's not what this video is about. So, to really dive in, let's start off with an easy topic. Let's talk about... Starting with the Xbox original, many of the issues could be explained as developing technology. We were still learning how to figure out a lot of stuff with video games, but, one of the biggest issues that I've heard is that the Xbox original was very noisy. Hard drive would make this little kind of noise, and it was very unpleasant to listen to. And sometimes it wasn't just a bit noisy. Sometimes it was very noisy. And all the time, it was incredibly bulky. As you can see with the dimensions shown here, the thing was massive. Compared to the PS2, the thing was considerably larger. And even compared to the PS3, the generation following the PS2, it was massive. It was almost the same size as the PS3. That's crazy. But, honestly, weirdly impressive.
Hey, you already know we got that big old box.
One problem that triumphed all of these other issues, though, was the initial small game pool that the Xbox had during 2001. In 2001, only 37 games were released to the Xbox, and, this would eventually get remedied over the next 7 years that the console, was going on and getting games, with the current library being somewhere between 800 and 900 in North America. But for the initial bit of its lifespan of 2001, Xbox was heavily carried by Halo. While the Xbox original had some hardware issues, most of the issues were ultimately fine in regards to the console. Some of it was noisy, it was a bit bulky, you could get by that. But its predecessor, Xbox 360, you couldn't say the same thing about that. Now, the Xbox 360 released in 2005, November 22nd. And, it's undeniable, it had far superior hardware. But it also had far superior problems. Because while some of the games were great,
this world is full of things that don't go as you wish. The longer you live, the more you realize reality is just made of pain, suffering, and emptiness. Listen, in this world, whenever there is light, there are also shadows. As long as the concept of winners exists, there must also be losers.
Seriously, the original Xbox already had a failure rate of approximately 25%, but the Xbox 360 had a failure rate initially of around 54.2%. Jesus Christ. This was caused by a soldering issue between the CPU and GPU to the motherboard, and later models like the Slim and the E of the Xbox 360 would ultimately remedy this issue, reducing it drastically to around 10%, which was about the same rate as the initial failure rate of the PS3, a lot more acceptable. But it just baffles me that a company that had made so much success after the Xbox original and its release would just somehow not notice that that soldering issue would be such a massive problem. The Xbox One and the Xbox Series X and S released in November 22nd of 2013 and November 10th of 2020 respectively. Both were fine in terms of their hardware, and they serve their function as a console perfectly fine, but that's all that they are. A perfectly fine, mediocre console. And once again, to iterate, don't take this as me insulting the hardware of the console. Hardware's fine. But the real issue of these consoles comes from my god, Xbox infuriates me sometimes. Yes, other companies might make decisions that are worse for their consumers, or just worse for their companies as a whole, or just collectively worse decisions, right? Like, sure, I'll give you that. But at the same time, for the level that they stand on, and for how much money they make annually, Xbox is the king, the god of making bad corporate decisions. Because, like, genuinely, what are they doing half the time? Let's start with an easy one. Xbox in November 15th of 2002 made Xbox Live a subscription-based service in order to play, and use a lot of their online features. And, it was developing technology at the time, so maybe you can make the argument, like, yeah, it makes sense in that. But, to me, no, it doesn't. It doesn't make sense to me. I'm already paying for the console. I'm already paying for the games. I'm already paying for my own internet, which God only knows if they have, like, a share in it or something. Like, I'm already paying for all of this stuff. Why do I need to pay in order to play my games online? It just doesn't make any sense to me. Obviously, companies can get away with it without, like, they don't need to do it, though. They're able to get away with it, but there are examples where they don't need to do it. Steam. Epic Games. Epic Games sucks, but Epic Games. Like, why do we, everything is subscription based. Why does everything have to be subscription based? Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, which I would have, I used to consider the most economically viable option if you were looking to understand what niche of games you like to get into, and also to, have access to a wide variety if you didn't want to spend on a bunch of games. Whenever it started out, in June of 2019, it was $15, right? And that makes sense. That's a good starting point. And then, over time, there was some logical whatever. And in July of 2024, that price got raised to $20, roughly. And, you know what? Over all of those years, makes sense. It's been 5 entire years. Sure, we'll give them that. In October of this year, in the year of 2025, it went from $20 to $30. A 50% increase.
Almost as high as the failure rate of the Xbox 360 initially.
Yet still somehow lower. What the fuck? At this point, just buy and refund the games. Like, you can't tell me that an $120 price increase is worth having a wide library of $5 to $15 games with, like, some very unique exceptions. And just as briefly as it lived, I'll briefly cover the Kinect. I had one for the Xbox 360 as a kid. I played Just Dance, Kinect Adventures, etc. My cousins had the original model of the Xbox One, so they had the pleasure of owning a Kinect. I mean, the thing didn't work if you didn't have the Kinect and, plugged into the console, so there wasn't much of a choice. I really don't understand why they had to force it upon people with the Xbox One compared to the Xbox 360. Other than collecting data on people, because it was still powered on even while the console was asleep. Being realistic, it wasn't likely collecting data, as it just had to maintain low power in order to still use voice commands in order to, turn on the console without having to, use the controller or buttons or anything like that. But I really don't blame people for thinking that Microsoft would try and collect their data, given Microsoft has about as clean a record as a company sponge. Xbox would eventually stop selling the Kinect with the Xbox One and started selling it separately October of 2014. But obviously this was a bit too late, because October 14th of 2017, it was just discontinued altogether. While the things mentioned prior pretty much only affected customers, don't worry, Xbox has something that affects not only customers, but it also affects themselves. And to me, this is probably the thing that annoys me the most, just due to the lack of consistency. The nomenclature. The nomenclature for the Xbox lineup is just by far the worst of any console. I want you to just take it in mind how the PlayStation lineup goes. Okay, and this is gonna sound crazy. You got the PlayStation 1, then the 2, then the 3, then the 4, then the 5. Wow. And you know what's crazy? What's the better version of the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 5? The PlayStation 4 Pro and the PlayStation 5 Pro. So easy to remember. Beautiful, beautiful execution. Because sometimes you don't need to have super complicated things in order to be effective. Now for Xbox. Xbox 360, Xbox One, and Xbox Series? And which one takes discs? The X or the S? Well, it's not going to be the S. The S is the one that is digital only. The X is the one that has the physical hardware to take discs. But that if you were a reoccurring Xbox player, the S models... the S models were just slim versions. They had disk drives. And not to even mention the fact that the X one used to just mean the more powerful one. And mind you, the Series X is the more powerful one. But there's also not a Series X model that takes discs that is just a baseline. There's not just an Xbox Series. And while we're on that, can I mention something? Even that part of the nomenclature, none of the nomenclature thus far has been any way consistent. But the Xbox One X was the more powerful Xbox One, right? And for the Xbox Slim, right, you had the 360S Slim. You had the Xbox One S Slim. Xbox Series S Slim. At least, they're the smaller slim models, and all that. So that's at least kind of consistent, aside from the disk drive, which is pretty important. But for the Xbox, the Series X is the baseline. The Xbox One X is the upgrade. And for the Xbox 360, the upgraded version is the Xbox 360E. Now, you may be thinking, oh, well, I mean, it's not great, but I can still keep up with it. And sure, that's fine. I'm glad that you're able to keep up with it. But you got to remember, not every part of the audience, in fact, a large chunk of the audience purchasing consoles isn't going to be the well-educated gamers like yourself. You might be able to keep up with it, but guess who's not going to be able to keep up with it? Parents. According to a study performed by Matt Piscatella in July 2025, only about 3% of hardware sales are conducted by people of the age between 18 to 25. Although not performed in the same year, in 2019, Huang Nguyen, I don't speak Vietnamese, forgive me for that pronunciation, but he performed a study that found that between 10 to 20% of parents of those between the ages of 16 to 18 intended to purchase an Xbox for their, technical child. And it was approximately 20% for children between the age of 5 to 7. To those of you who don't see that kind of number as significant, keep in mind that affects millions of consumers. And when, as a parent, you're trying to find a console that's within your budget to purchase for your child while also still trying to get them the latest and greatest, when trying to buy that console becomes a research project, when you already have like work and other things, you know, occupying your life, that makes it a challenge. It's a genuine problem. But don't worry, Xbox has been trying their hardest to make sure that if you're confused about which console to buy in order to play their games, or for your child to play their games, don't worry. They've got it all figured out, because you don't even need to bother. Why purchase an Xbox to play Xbox games when you could just purchase a PlayStation to play Xbox games? Ignoring the obvious that, you know, pretty much every Xbox game is on PC, you know, you can make the argument that, you know, that maybe that isn't a good alternative. But I just don't agree with that, because if you're just someone looking to play games, right? PC is both significantly more complicated and also considerably more expensive.
Especially now, Jesus Christ.
And while generally I don't care what decisions Microsoft and Xbox make, as long as it doesn't affect me, the consumer, on my platforms, I also can't deny that it's an incredibly stupid decision for them to take some of their flagship titles and put it onto PlayStation. I mean, you can play the goddamn Halo Master Chief Collection on PlayStation. Halo! And, you know, for some of these games, you know, it makes sense. Like Minecraft. Minecraft used to be kind of just like a Microsoft property after they purchased Mojang and all that. But, you know, you could understand them giving that to other platforms like PlayStation, their direct competitor. Because, I mean, obviously it was just going to be such a cash cow. They could see the potential that it would make them a ton of money, and they were like, yeah, we'll do it. But that's the thing. It isn't just Minecraft and Halo. Sea of Thieves, Grounded, Hi-Fi Rush, Gandhi, even Forza and Gears of War have come over to PlayStation. There might be something that I'm just not understanding in this decision, but it's the whole thing of not understanding that is the problem. Like, why I don't understand why I would purchase an Xbox console if I know that inevitably Xbox games are just going to end up on a PlayStation anyway. I mean, yeah, I'll have to wait, but is that really, like, that bad of a deal? I mean, PlayStation's constantly releasing solid games, so while I'm waiting, I'll just play some PlayStation games. Alright, so I've rambled off a lot of things that, you know, I don't understand, the decisions, going in depth and all that, right? So I'm just going to do you a favor, and for this last little bit, I'm just going to, you know, blitz off everything else that kind of just either annoys me, or I don't get, or blah blah blah. The Xbox Series 1 controller was expensive as hell, yet still didn't come with rechargeable batteries. Sold separately. The Xbox Series 2 controller cost $200 off sale. The wrong Xbox Ally X looks strangely cheap, yet cost $350 more than the highest end model of the OLED Steam Deck. You know, there are some improvements in performance, but $350 worth? The Xbox One Fat model looks ugly to me. The voice commands for the Kinect just barely ever functioned, if they even did, and motion controls basically never worked on anything properly other than Just Dance. The Xbox Store kinda sucks to look at compared to the Xbox 360 days. It also kinda sucks to use. It kinda sucks. I loved playing the Xbox One and the Xbox 360 whenever I was a kid, and, you know, I still enjoy playing, like, Xbox whenever I go hang out with my friends, but, like, Xbox, and by extension, Microsoft, make some of the most incompetent decisions that I have ever seen in gaming. And, you know, I genuinely would love to see them improve. I'd love to see them, you know, change, and I'd love to see them become something greater, but seeing as how much money that they make, I just don't see that happening. Hey, just gonna go ahead and be transparent on this. I'm using the script because I'm really bad at, you know, making a proper thanks, but I, you know, wanted to make a proper, thank you to you for sticking to the video. I really do appreciate it. Thank you very much for sticking around. I greatly appreciate your attention. It took a while writing and researching for this, so if you could do me a favor, you know, leave feedback on the video about how you felt about the video. I always want to improve, but I do just enjoy talking about stuff, so, you know, I'm love of the game, you know what I mean? But genuinely, if you have anything you'd like to say, like anything you'd like to see improved, I'd love to hear it. I'm always down to hear that kind of thing. And, you know, if there's anything I got wrong, I'm also more than glad to hear that. I always love to be corrected. You know, that kind of deal. But regardless, I, I know that I appreciate what you've done in terms of, watching the video. I appreciate you for just sticking to the video. Take it easy. Hope you have a good day or night. And hopefully I'll see you again in another video.